We continue now at the top of Daf Tzadi Gimel Amud Aleph Meseches Bava Kamma. This is Bava Kamma Daf 93a. On the previous Amud, the Gemara asked, where do we know this idea that people say that when we were young we were treated like men, but when we're older we're treated like children? And the Gemara says the source is from the Bnei Yisrael in the wilderness. At the beginning, when they were young, so to speak, in the wilderness, they were guided by Hashem. But then at the end it says, Hinei anochi sholeach malach lefanecha l'shmorcha baderech. It says, behold, I'm sending an angel in front of you to guard you on the road. So the idea that they weren't protected directly by HaKadosh Baruch Hu as they got older, that's the same idea as the expression. And the Gemara continues, Amarle Rava l'Rava bar Mori. Rava said to Rava bar Mori, Minoha milsa da amri inshi. From where do we know this idea that people say, Basar Mori nichsi tzivi mashach, that after a property owner you should drag wood, meaning if you do small things for somebody who's wealthy, maybe that will benefit you in the end. Amarle said to him, because it's written, V'gam lelot ha'oleches Avram, that also for Lot who accompanied Avram, hayatzonu vakar v'halim, he also had tzonu vakar, and he had tents, meaning to say he had wealth. The idea was because he accompanied Avram, so therefore he became wealthy as well. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chanan says, Hamoser din al chaver, if somebody gives over judgment to his friend, meaning he asks that Hashem, so to speak, should punish this particular person, so hu nenash tchila, so he actually is the one that's punished first. Shenemar, as it says in the Pasuk, Vatomer Sarai el Avram, Chamosi olecha, it says that Sarai said to Avram that you wronged me. Essentially, Sarai asked that Hashem should punish Avram. Uchsiv, and it's written, Vayavo Avram l'spod l'Sara v'levkos, it says that Avram came to eulogize Sarah and to cry over her, so she was punished first. V'hani mili di islay dina ba'ara. Now this is true if there is a judge in the land who could have taken care of it, meaning in the case of Avram and Sarah, there was a bezdin, there was a court in the land. Some say that refers to the court of shame that could have taken care of things, and therefore the person shouldn't cry out to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so to speak. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak says, Oy lo litzoek yoser min hanitzak. Woe is to the one who screams out more than the one that's being screamed out about. Again, the same basic idea. Somebody is tzoek, somebody cries out about somebody that's doing them wrong. It could be worse for the tzoek. And the Gemara says, Tanya nami hach, we have a brisa like this as well. Echad ha-tzoek ve'echad ha-nitzak b'mashma. The pasuk is referring to both the tzoek and the nitzak. They can both be punished. Ela shememarin l'tzoek yoser min ha-nitzak. But it's quicker. The punishment for the one who cries out is quicker than the one who's the nitzak, the one who's being cried out about. As Rashi says, Echad ha-tzoek ve'echad ha-nitzak b'mashma v'chora api v'harakti eschem. It says that I'll get angry and I will kill you. Shnayim b'mashma. It sounds like it's referring to both the tzoek and the nitzak. Ela shememarin min but the punishment comes quicker from the tzoek, as we find is true by Sarah. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rabbi Yitzchak, and Rabbi Yitzchak says, Li'olam alti kilalas hedyot kala beinecha. The curse of a simple person should not be light in your eyes. Shari Avimelech kilala Sarah, because Avimelech cursed Sarah. V'neskayim bezara, and that curse was fulfilled with her children. Shenemar, as it says in the pasuk, Hinehu lach kesus einayim, it's going to be for you a covering, means to say a covering of the eyes. Amar lo, he said to her as follows, Hoel v'chisisa mimeni v'lo gilisa shu ishech, since you covered this up from me, and you didn't reveal that this was your husband, v'garamta elai hatzar azen, therefore you caused me this pain, so that was a curse. Yehi ratzon shiulach banai kesoy einayim, you should have a son that also has covered eyes, v'neskayim bezara, and that actually was fulfilled with her children. As it's written, Vayiki Zok in Yitzchak, it says when Yitzchak was old, Batechena Einav Meiros, he wasn't able to see, so you see that the curse was fulfilled. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Avo says, Liolam yehi adam min hanirdafin. A person should always be among those that are pursued, those that are chased, v'lo min harodfin, not those that chase others. She'en lach nirdaf ba'ofos yoser miturma v'nei Yona. You have no birds that are pursued more than the doves and the pigeons, v'hechshirin hakasav l'gavi mizbeach. And the pasuk says that those are kosher to go on the mizbeach. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Ha'omer sa'mei es'ini v'chulu. If somebody says, blind me or cut off my hand, even if he says, do it on the condition that you'll be exempt, the person is not exempt. But if he says that you should tear my clothing, let's say, on the condition that you'll be exempt, so then the person is exempt, the person doesn't have to pay for the torn clothing. And the Gemara says, Amalei Ravasi bar Chama l'Rava. Ravasi bar Chama said to Rava, Ma'ishna reishu, ma'ishna seifa. What's the difference in the reisha? In the beginning of the Mishnah, we say, even if he says on the condition you're exempt, over there by the limbs he's not exempt. But when it comes to the person's clothing, etc., so there the person is exempt. What's the difference between the two cases? Amar Lei said to him, Reisha lefisha ein adam mochel al rasha ivarim. The reason in the Reisha, in the beginning of the Mishnah, the reason why he's not patur is because it's understood that a person does not forgive if there's damage to his limbs. But the Gemara continues, if that's the reason, Amar Lei said back to him, V'chiyadam mochel al tzaro, do you think a person is mochel on his pain? But we do find that by the situation of pain, he is exempt. The Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Hakeni pitzeni al manas lifter, if he says, strike me, wound me on the condition to be potter. So potter, there he actually is potter. But we should be applying the same logic that there's no mechila when it comes to pain. So Ishtik, so he was silent with that question. Amar, and he said, Midi shmi alach b'ha, did you hear anything about this? Amar Lei said to him, Hachi Amar Rav Sheshes, this is what Rav Sheshes says, Mishum Pagam Mishpacha, the real reason when there's an injury to the limb, the real reason why even if he says do it and you'll be exempt, that the person is not exempt, is because it's actually a Pagam, it's like a blemish for the whole family, that they have someone in the family missing a limb, and that's not something the person even has the ability to forgive. And the Gemara continues, Itmar, there's a Machlokas Amoraim about this issue, Rav Oshia Amar Mishum Pagam Mishpacha, Rav Oshia says the reason why you can't forgive, or you can't exempt the person by the case of an injury to the limb, is because again, it's a pagam mishpach, it's a blemish on the family. But Rava says, as we said above, mishum she'ein adam mochel al rasha ivarm shelo. It's because a person is not mochel on rasha ivarm. He's not going to be mochel on this kind of damage to his limbs. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yochanan says, Yesh hein shu kalav. Sometimes a person says yes, but it's really the equivalent of saying no. V'yesh lav shehu kahen, and sometimes a person says no, and it's really the equivalent of saying yes. And the example is as follows. Tanya Namihach, we have a brisa like this as well. Hakeni pitzeni, let's say he says hit me, he says strike me, wound me, and then the person asks, Al manas lifter, is it on condition that I'm exempt? V'yamar alone, he says hein, he says yes. So over there he's not saying yes, you're going to be exempt. What he's saying, yes, do you think I'm saying this, that you're exempt? Of course you're not exempt. Harei yesh hein shu kalav, that's an example of a yes, that's really a no. Koras ksusi, if he says similarly, let's say he says tear my clothing, he says Al manas lifter, is it on condition that I'll be exempt? V'yamar lo lav, and he says no, that also means no. Do you think you're not going to be exempt? Of course you will be exempt. Harei lav shehu kahen, that's an example of a no, that is really a yes. And Rashi explains, Hakeni pitzeni v'yamar le zel manas lifter, the other person responds, am I hitting you on the condition that I'm potter? V'yamar nechval hein, and the person responds yes, yesh hein shu kalav, so sometimes that's like a no. I'at machai, meaning if he says it almost like a question, yes, you think that you're going to be potter, there he's really saying no, you're not potter. But let's say he answers him as a statement, so potter, then he really is saying that the person is potter, just depends how he says it. Now the brisa earlier that seemed to say potter in this situation, when he says strike me, wound me, and it's on the condition you're potter, then we say he is potter. But damar nechbal kulamil, so that's a totally different case. That's when the person who's being hit says the entire sentence. Hakenu pitzeni al manas lifter, he says strike me, wound me, on the condition of being potter. The havadai dafka amarle, there we certainly take him seriously, exactly what he's saying. And yesh lav shukeni atma potter, again, same idea. Sometimes a no is like a yes if he says it in this way of a question. Now the only reason we're making the distinction here and saying an example of chiyuv by a wound and an example where the person is actually potter by the person's property, that's just orchei de milse nakat, that's just the normal way. Just in general, generally people forgive more when it comes to their property than when it comes to their body, so that's just the normal case. But really the way we are deciphering what the person means is based on how the person responded. Did he respond in the form of a statement or the form of a question? And the Gemara continues at the two dots, Shabir eskadi kores kasusi chayiv. If a person says to another person, break my jug, or he says, tear my garment, so the person is still chayiv, even though he gave him permission. The only time the person is potter is if he says it's on condition that you're exempt. Otherwise, the person is chayiv. And the Gemara says, Uramini, we have the following contradiction. The Brisa says, Lishmor v'lo la'abid. It says you give something to somebody to watch and not to destroy. Lishmor v'lo l'kroa, to watch it, not to tear it. Lishmor v'lo l'chalik la'aniyim, to watch it, not to distribute it to the poor. Meaning the implication is that if it's given over to destroy, if it's given over to be torn, if it's given over to be distributed, then the person is not held responsible. Our Mishnah seems to say the person is responsible. And the Gemara says, Amar Rav Huna says, Lokash is not difficult. Hada asal yadi. In one case we're talking where it comes into his possession, and hadalo asal yadi. In the other case we're talking where it does not come into his possession. Meaning to say that if it came into his possession, so then he is going to be responsible. And the Gemara says, Amar le Rabba, Rabba said to him, what does that mean? Lishmor da'asi liyadei mashma. On the contrary, in the pasuk it says Lishmor, that sounds like it did come into his possession, and still he was not responsible. And so the Gemara says, Alama Rabba, rather Rabba says, Hava Had Asal Liyadi. In both cases, it actually did come into his possession. Velo Kasha, but it's not difficult. Had Asal Liyadi B'Torah Shmira. In one case, we're talking where it came into his possession to watch over it. In that case, he is held responsible. Had Asal Liyadi B'Torah Kriya. But in the other case, it came into his possession for the purpose of tearing it. There he is not responsible. And the Gemara continues, how Arnika did tzedakah da'asi lepumbedisa, there was a purse of tzedakah that came to pumbedisa. Afkeda Rav Yosef gabe hu governor, Rav Yosef deposited by a certain person. Pashaba, and the person was negligent, and asu ganve ganvu, and the thieves came and they stole it. Chayve Rav Yosef, so Rav Yosef says he's chayev, he's obligated, he was not properly responsible for that tzedakah. Amar le Abaye, so Abaye said to Rav Yosef, Vatanya, but we learned in the Brisa, lishmor v'lo lechalik le'anim, you're only responsible if you got it to watch over it, but if you got it to distribute it to the poor, you're actually not held responsible. Amar le said back to him, Aniyeh de pumbedisa mekatz kitzlu, the poor people of pumbedisa, there's a set amount that goes to each person, the lishmor who, and therefore if it's given over to this individual, it is not for distribution, it's actually being given over to him to watch over, and that's why he is responsible. And Rashi explains, Lishmor v'lo la'abe, to watch over but not to destroy, meaning, Ki yitein v'gomer, the pasuk talks about giving over something to somebody to watch, Lishmor dehifkidu etzlo lishmor chaye b'pshiyah, meaning, if something was given over that the person's supposed to watch it, then he's chayev if there's negligence. V'lo k'shefkidu etzlo manas la'abed, but let's say it was given to him to destroy, or manas l'chalik la'anim, or it's given over to him that he should distribute it to the poor. The lo karina be lishmor, that's not called being given over as a shomer. The kaven damar lechilkeyu, since he said distribute it, sulo the mafkininu, so then it's no longer considered to be of the mafkids. Uman katava, so who is the owner of this item now that is able to claim it back from this guy? V'aniyim lo matzu tavi, the aniyim, they can't make any claims. L'chol chad v'chad matzu yamar, because to each person, this person who's supposed to distribute to the poor, to each particular ani, he can say, lav l'didach, yehivna l'achrini, I wasn't going to give it to you, I was going to give it to a different poor person. That's why if it's given over for distribution to the poor, the person essentially is not responsible. And Rashi continues, the Gemara said, da'asa liyadi, if it came into his possession, v'kara biyadi, and then again it was torn in his possession, chayiv, then he's chayiv, ilo amar le'amanas lifter, unless it was explicitly stated that there's a condition that he's exempt. Ve'afilu asal yadimei kara amanas la'abed. The Gemara initially is saying, even if it came into his hand originally on the condition to destroy, still he's going to be held responsible. But then the Gemara said, what does that mean? Lishmor da'asal yadei mashma. On the contrary, the word lishmor sounds like it did come into his possession. D'chsev v'chiyite, and it says it's given to him. Ve'afilu hachi kamma ma'ile, and still it seems to be he's exempt, he's not held responsible. And so the Gemara says it actually depends how it came into his possession. In one case we're talking where it came into his possession to watch over. Then he told him to tear it. Chayev, there he'd be chayev. Unless he told him explicitly that it's on condition you'll be exempt. And finally, the Gemara had a story. Rav Yosef, Gabai Hava, Rav Yosef was the Gabai, he was in charge of this distribution. And so Rav Yosef said the person is held responsible for his negligence. And Abaye said, but doesn't it say Lishmor v'lo l'chalik le'aniyim? And the answer was that when it came to the aniyim of Pumbedisa, kitzlu, it's a set amount. Mamon kach v'kach l'Shabbos. Everybody gets a certain amount of money each week, l'chol echad, for each person. Havalei mamon sheyesh lo tov, and therefore it becomes money where there is somebody who can claim the money. It is as if there's an owner here, and therefore the person v'karina bei lishmor, we consider it a case where he does have to watch over it. Hadron Allah hachovel. We will return to you parak hachovel. This is the end of the 8th parak of Meseches Bava Kamma. If you're enjoying these videos and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe. And take a look at the description box below to see how you can support this channel. And in the next video, we will begin the 9th parak of Meseches Bava Kamma on Daf Tzadi Gimel Amud Beis.